Okay, that's all right.
All I do with YouTube right now is I just repost my TikToks. So
Okay, we just went live.
okay.
So
Hi, everybody.
All right. So everybody, welcome and to the Fun Show. This is today we're we're joined by Mike Nellis, who I discovered through the White Dudes for Harris, and I was going to do a thing on union workers for Harris, but because I got long COVID and didn't have the energy for it, that never panned out, unfortunately. But anyway, I did make a friend through that, and his name is Mike Nellis. He's the founder of one of the co-founders of White Dudes for Harris. He used to be in a campaign. Were you a manager or staffer? Or?
For Harris, I was a senior advisor. I oversaw all of her digital for 5 years, her digital fundraising, advertising, social media, etc. And I was with her when she was attorney general, and then she became a senator, and then we ran for president. And then when she joined the Biden ticket, I moved on to other stuff.
And he also has drawn the ire of a certain wrestler in the House of Representatives. So do you want to start off just by telling us about what happened with all of that?
Yeah, I can give folks like a quick run through. I mean, basically there's an ongoing right-wing conspiracy theory that involves my business and my business partner. So I have a business partner that's been with me for a really long time. She's amazing. And, her dad happens to be the judge in the Trump case in New York City, which has nothing to do with us because we're private citizens and political activists. But the right wing has concocted this, baloney story that, we're doing something wrong and that we're profiteering off of it, which we're not. And there's been all these conspiracy theories for a while. And then Jim Jordan, who is himself basically a right-wing conspiracy theorist, just with a gavel, decided that he was going to try to investigate us. And so we've been sort of going back and forth by sending each other letters. And it's a little bit of a legal process, so I have to be kind of careful about it. But there's all this, sort of like nonsense out there that the right wing just perpetrates and really has nothing to do with us. And more importantly to me, it's clearly an attempt to like disrupt our business, which it hasn't done. Like we work with a lot of big campaigns doing a lot of important work, and we've stayed focused on that.
So are you like, what does your business do?
Yeah, so I own Authentic. We're a digital marketing and online fundraising firm for Democratic candidates. So by trade, I write, at least I used to. I don't write as many as I used to, but I write fundraising emails, and that's a lot of what I've done for a lot of my career. So what I will tell your audience is, if you've read a fundraising email and you've been like, "Hey, that's pretty good," I wrote it. If you didn't like it, I didn't write it. But so no, but I mean, we founded the firm. I founded the firm almost 8 years ago. Kamala Harris was our first client, and I think is the bedrock upon which our firm's reputation was built on. But we do like digital advertising, digital fundraising, digital mobilization. We work with like many major Senate candidates, House candidates, governors, a lot of really cool nonprofits that do some work with the United Nations, amongst others.
Wow. So it must feel good. I mean, like, must be nice to be able to go to bed at night and like be at peace with yourself, knowing that you're actually doing good for the world.
It's, it's like it's a double-edged sword, right? Like I feel like one of the challenges of like having a career in social impact and in the political space is everybody in the political space, particularly like, large organizations, is sort of rob Peter to pay Paul, right? They take from your genuine desire to, advance the world, make the world a better place in your little corner of it, to advance on the issues that you care about. And then they kind of ask you to do the job of like 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people. Right. So to me, it's a little bit like, I've kind of got to be engaged all the time. I don't get to like turn off my brain a lot. I kind of have to, it just, you get kind of taken advantage of a little bit. So like, yes, I'm very proud of the career that I've had. I'm very proud of the work that we do. Very proud to have like figured out a way to be an entrepreneur that cares about the world, which is a hard thing to do. But you just kind of have both ends of it. And I will say, like, one of the reactions to that sometimes is like, as a political strategist, like I'm a little bit more numb to things that happen than others, because I think like my value to my clients is for me to be able to kind of very coldly go, this is good, this is bad, this is why. And you may have seen that yesterday. Like I posted my thoughts on Donald Trump's visit to McDonald's yesterday on Twitter. And everybody was like, it's a stunt, it's a stunt, it's a stunt. And like my reaction was, of course it was a stunt. That's not even a question. I'm like,
Right.
The question is it a good stunt or was it a bad stunt? And it wasn't a very good stunt.
Yeah.
Like I just I'm very like analytical with like, is this a good idea or a bad idea?
Right. Right.
Not help with the campaign. And beyond that, I don't get like as emotional as I probably did in my 20s.
Like if you're gonna do a stunt like that, you should probably like make sure you know how to work the fry station or something.
Well, it was like, I mean, it was, I mean, and folks can find my tweet if they want, but it was just sort of like, either you're trying to humanize Donald Trump by showing him, you know, by having some good photos that show him working the common man's job, right? Which would be like the attempt that they wanted to make, or you're attacking Kamala Harris for a story you made up that she didn't work at McDonald's in college, which nobody cares about.
Right.
And I don't think they accomplished either yesterday. It was
Right.
just like the photos are, you know, harmless to funny. And it was just, you've got 16 days left in this election. Like, what are you doing? I just don't.
That's not a great closing argument.
No.
Right up there with a 12-minute monologue on Arnold Palmer's penis.
I mean, it's silly season.
I always say the biggest asshole I ever worked for was when I was self-employed. So I totally identify with, you know, it's just when you're self-employed, it's hard to give yourself time off sometimes. So take care of yourself while you're doing all that.
Thank you.
But I appreciate the work you do. So the next thing that I wanted to ask you about is White Dudes for Harris. I think it's gotten some backlash, but I think that's kind of on purpose. Is that right? Like it was a poke.
I don't think it was on purpose. Like, I'll give everybody sort of the background on it. So, I'll give it from my perspective. So, I'm one of the founders of White Dudes for Harris. This was right after it was pretty clear that Kamala was the nominee. There had been the really great like Black Men and Black Women for Harris call. I think the White Women for Harris had just had their call and they raised like $8 million. And I was at a fundraiser for Debbie McCarcel-Powell here in Chicago. And I turned to the guy who was organizing it and I said, man, I love these calls that they're doing. And I really want to do like a White Men for Harris one, but I'm too chicken shit to do it. Like I'm too afraid to do it. And I'm worried I'm worried about what the backlash is going to be like. And I said, you know, I'm not going to do it. And I went to bed that night being like, I'm not going to do it. And Friday morning, I woke up to an email from my buddy, Ross Morales-Riquetto, who is, in my opinion, the actual founder of White Dudes for Harris. And he emailed me and he's like, I have this crazy idea. I want to put on a call. I want to do it Monday night. What do you think? Do you think we can get, our goal was to get 10,000 people on a call. That was it. We just wanted 10,000 people. And I went, the minute that somebody validated my idea, I was like, yes, let's do it. Like, let's run through the brick wall. And so I took over all the digital. Ross handled the politics. Brad Bauman handled the PR. And then we had like a lot of other like really great group of guys that we had all kind of like been around each other in this industry before and put it together. And we got 190,000 people to join the call that night. We got the dude himself, the Big Lebowski on to open.
That was classic.
Yeah.
Classic.
I'm now friends with Mark Hamill, kind of, not really, but a little bit. So it's a lot of, you know, it happened so fast. We raised $4.5 million. Then I think what we really did, like the money's great and the people on the call is great. What we really did was we started a conversation about masculinity on the left and the role that white dudes have to play in electing Kamala Harris. And what we've done to a certain degree, we've broken the brains of the right wing. Like we own a little bit of real estate and they're constantly attacking us. Like Jesse Waters every night on Fox News is doing some ridiculous stunt to try to like mock us and define masculinity. And to me, I've been saying this from the minute that Kamala Harris became the nominee. The two biggest issues in this election that are sort of, in my opinion, undercovered are masculinity and the role of men in our society, and family planning and what it means to have a family. And if you look, the right does an incredible job of leading, and I say leading in a pejorative sense, right? But like leading with those issues and their views on that. And then the pick of JD Vance, particularly on family, is very, very telling on what they want a family to look like. And they want to tell you what your family should look like. And we need to do a better job as Democrats communicating our family values and our views on masculinity and giving people an alternative. And like, if you follow me on Twitter, every couple of days, I've been posting something that's like, Kamala Harris needs to go on Joe Rogan. Like, people are like, she needs to go on Hot Ones. And like, I agree, she should go on Hot Ones, but she needs to go on Joe Rogan first, because there's so many young white men that have not heard from her And I think it would be a huge opportunity. And there's a poll out today that has her overperforming Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden with non-college educated white guys. Wow. And that is huge by a significant margin. I think it was like 10 or 11%. And Donald Trump built his coalition on that. And for Kamala to be eating into those numbers is significant. And it's because they've taken that very seriously. And I'd love for us to take credit for that. I don't know that we can take credit for that, but I think we can say that we started the conversation and shifted the Overton window a little bit because people were too afraid to talk about it.
Right.
Because we're organizing other communities, but we're not organizing white guys or rural voters or anything like that. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Like there's kind of been a just yielding of that territory to the Republicans. They're going to win on that issue, no matter how divisive they are. But I think maybe Roe and Dobbs started to shift that conversation because it's not just that it affects women. It affects wives. It affects sisters. It affects daughters. It affects mothers. And so it's like, it's not just like, I think sometimes we look at women's issues as not affecting men. But, you know, like his name escapes me, but the guy who nearly found his wife dead because he couldn't get a DNC in Texas.
Yeah.
Ryan Hamilton, I think, maybe. Anyway, he's a good follow. But, you know, like, we're starting to wake up to the fact these issues affect men. These are not women's issues. These are issues about men or about women, but they're also men's issues because we have wives, we have sisters, we have daughters, you know. So they've got this, almost like Handmaid's Tale mindset where it seems like more and more to them, women are just baby factories. That's why they exist. There was a Ben Shapiro interview or a Ben Shapiro clip that was going viral.
Yeah.
And he talked about, it was about gay marriage actually, but he was saying that gay marriage isn't valid because you can't reproduce, and the whole value of marriage to the state is that it creates families or whatever. And I just thought, what kind of fascist attitude is that your marriage is there for the state and not that the state is there just to affirm that you have this relationship for legal reasons? Like, that's all that marriage is it's just a state's, it's the government's not even endorsement, acknowledgement that this is a relationship that you and another party have entered into. And that's where it ends. You know, it doesn't get to define what that relationship is or who's allowed to have it. But anyway, it just got me thinking that there is this weird extremist view of families that the right has now. And then like J.D. Vance came along with all his wackadoodle stuff, you know, that if you're single or don't have babies, then you're somehow a sociopath. I think he used the word sociopath.
Well, he's certainly made it clear that, you know, the only function that he believes that women have is to have kids, right? And that's why, like, he, you know, and by the way, it's biological kids, which to me is even crazier because, like, you know, how many times does he attack Kamala Harris for not having biological kids, which is just ridiculous. But I think to what you just said, I want Democrats to kick the door open in terms of how we talk to white dudes and white men. And it extensively, like, you are correct that the issues that we're talking about in this election when it pertains to women and how we treat women and the rights that they have are incredibly important, and we need to keep talking about them aggressively and with great salience. But we also have to develop a platform to talk about the things that impact white men directly, because the way it impacts women is indirectly, right? Like my wife had a miscarriage, which is true. She needed a DNC a few years ago. Like, those things impact me, but they're indirectly impacting me, right? Because I care about my wife. But there's a whole host of problems that men are dealing with that I don't think either party is doing a very good job talking about. And it stems with, like, obviously it's like lack of economic opportunity. It's figuring out the role of men in a shifting society. Like, traditional masculinity is changing, and you sort of have this like last grasp of, like, Andrew Tates of the world who are trying to find what masculinity is. And then you obviously have like the Donald Trump and the JD Vance of the world trying to define what it is. But there's also an epidemic of loneliness and a mental health problem inside white guy communities, particularly younger white guy communities. And it's a huge problem. Like, white men in America are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than any other group of people in the United States.
Wow.
4 times. And I have a hard time believing that if there were any other group of people in the United States that had suicide rates that were that high, that the Democratic Party wouldn't be talking about it. And that's a legitimate criticism I have of the Democratic Party. I haven't heard any politician on either side talk about that, but it's a huge issue. Drug abuse, deaths of despair, gun violence, like they stem from this. And we need to, like, I really like that the Democratic Party does a good job putting out policies for certain constituencies, but they need to do that for white guys too. They do. And I think, and go, and actually, I'll step back on that, because there's something somewhat savvy that the Trump campaign is doing right now. I don't like the way that they're doing it, so I don't want it to be seen that I'm endorsing Donald Trump and the things that he does, because I'm not a fan. Obviously, I hope people know that. But he's got this ad out there right now, and it's a disgusting ad that's hitting Kamala Harris on transgender issues. And for advocating for allowing inmates to get transgender surgery, which, by the way,
I think I've seen that a couple of thousand times here in Texas.
Couple thousand times. But at the tagline of that ad, which is maybe the best political thing I've seen from the Trump campaign this cycle, is Kamala Harris is for they, them, not us, which is gross. But as a political practitioner that has to view things kind of coldly and evaluate it, I'm like, it's not bad. It's not bad politics. And it's not bad politics because what the right has done, particularly with young white men, but I think white men generally, is make it pretty clear that the Democratic Party doesn't stand for them. Well, the Democrats, they're for people of color, they're for gay people, they're for transgender people, but they're not for you. And so it doesn't matter what we say or what policies we advocate if they don't believe that we're for them. And that's why we have to go into those spaces and campaign. The Harris campaign is doing this, right? They're going to rural communities. They're going on shows that they don't traditionally go on. For God's sakes, Tim Walz was on the Rich Eisen podcast this week, which was incredible. I don't think I've ever seen a politician on the Rich Eisen podcast. So it was pretty cool. And there's a bunch of other shows like that. Like, you hear me talk about Rogan all the time, but we need to go into those spaces, and we need to make sure that, one, people are hearing from us about what we care about and who we are, and not from the right or, podcasters like Joe Rogan, like Unfettered, or, Fox News or something like that, and make sure that we're advocating and communicating with those folks all the time. And then we make them believe us that, like, hey, we care and we understand these issues, and here are the leaders in our party who understand them. And then we go, here's the policy solution. And we do that very effectively with other groups of people, but we don't do it with white dudes. And it's a huge unforced error. And MAGAism cannot exist without the margins that they get from white dudes and rural voters. They simply cannot exist. And so if we can erode it by a couple of percentage points across the country, Donald Trump can never win nationally. Not even close. And candidates
how
like
would you
have to modulate their policies. Go ahead. Sorry.
What message would you suggest? What would you say to them? Like, you've got the typical white guy that's for Donald Trump, and what would you say to crack that open?
Yeah, I think it comes down to freedom more than anything, like freedom of choice and freedom of opportunity. And I think the Harris campaign has that largely right. And it also comes down to a lot of shared language. And then this is where, like, people are more likely to trust people who look like them, which is always going to be a huge problem when we're communicating. But, like, so finding more, white guys that can go out and advocate this effectively. But to me, like, I have a post about this from a few days ago. Like, I feel really strongly that one of the things Democrats need to do is reclaim the term family values. Because I'm absolutely sick and tired of being lectured by, one, a guy who has 3 marriages and, like, 7 kids with 10 different women, Donald Trump, telling us, what my family should look like, or JD Vance telling me what my family should look like. Right. And so I would aggressively be out there. Like, if I was running for office, I would be aggressively out there going, I'm going to fight for your family no matter what it looks like. Because in this country, you should have the fundamental right to marry whoever you want, to have your family you want, when you want to have it, with the tools that you need, and you get to dictate that. And I think the same extends to like masculinity, right? Like there are a lot of men, like, look, all of us, I can only speak to my experience as a white guy. And this is one of the things I say about the White Dudes for Harris call is what was fun about that call for me, both in organizing it and watching it and keeping the trains running on time, was the diversity of experiences amongst white men. Mm-hmm. And it's such a silly thing to say because a lot of people will roll their eyes at that and be like, well, white men are the same and white men don't have any problems, but we do. And, and the experience was different. Like Sean Astin talked about, his brother's struggle with, I think, addiction and mental health challenges. And he had this great like men's group that he went to. Like men used to have like men's groups that they would go to, and you'd go to the YMCA and hang out with your friends. And like, I'm too young to know what a men's group is. Like, I don't. Like a men's group to me is like something I would probably like roll my eyes at and assume is like a Facebook or a Reddit group. And but it's a real thing that a lot of people I think still have to this day. And so the experiences were different. And I think in the same vein of freedom, when we're talking about your freedom to decide when you have kids, to decide who you marry, it's your freedom to choose how you want to live your life. Mm-hmm. And if you want to live a life where like you're traditionally masculine and like you're jacked or whatever it is, that's fine. And if I want to live a life where like look, I have a 5-year-old little boy at home. Okay. And like I had a father who was very intense, very, I think, traditionally masculine, very tough guy-ish. And I'm not really like that. Like I think real masculinity and empathy comes from empathy and compassion, being able to wear your heart on your sleeve. But that's a hard thing to teach a lot of men. And I think what we end up doing is we end up preaching to them. Yeah. Well, you should be like this. And they're like, well, how? Like, they don't even know how to be like that because they've never seen it. They just
call it virtue signaling or whatever.
Right. Well, and it's really hard to be something you've never seen before. And you hear that phrase a lot when it comes to like, like Kamala Harris. Like it's hard to figure out like the right way to be the first female president when there's never been a female president. Right. It's hard for little girls to imagine themselves as that. But like if you're a little boy or if you're like a teenage boy and you've never seen a man lead with empathy and compassion to wear their heart on their sleeves, how do you do that if you've never seen it before? And so we need to create more role models. We need to lead with that. And like I really like Mayor Pete as somebody who advocates for this. I really like Tim Wall. I really love the Tim Walz pick. I think it's a perfect example of like a man who leads with empathy and compassion, but has more traditional masculinity associated with him, like being a football coach and being a high school.
Oh yeah, I was running this conversation on Twitter. I was asking, who would you rather, if your car broke down, who would you rather pull over to aid you, JD Vance or Tim Walz?
Exactly.
And so like that traditional role of I fix cars. Tim Walz has that down. Yep. JD Vance, I don't think could find an oil cap.
Right. And truthfully, neither could I. So
yeah. And I've never changed the oil either. So I'm not,
But I don't pretend to be a tough guy, and JD Vance does. Like I don't preach to men. I try not to preach to men about what their masculinity looks like. We have a question here. Do you want me to try to take that?
Sure.
Okay. So we need our spaces. This is the question of, and I'm just going to repeat it for maybe folks who can't see it, but I agree men that need their spaces. But how do we talk rationally with those who subscribe to the alpha male trope? I mean, I think it starts with leveling the playing field a little bit and trying to come in with like respect and listening and understanding. And it's really hard sometimes because there are a lot of alpha males that drive me up the wall. And I've dealt with so many of them in my life. And by the way, I realize I'm speaking from an immense place of privilege where like I'm a relatively affluent, successful white dude, talking about how to talk to other, affluent white dudes. But like, I think it's like, you got to be like, what are you trying to solve for? And I one of the things I've been talking a lot about about this is when this election's over, win, lose, or draw, I want us to spend some real time as a party and as a movement listening and engaging and not trying to solve anything. I just want to do like information and like I want to go. I've been trying to figure out the right way to articulate this, but I kind of want to go on like a 20 city tour where I'm going to go to like some of the biggest Trump areas and I'm just going to listen. And be like, why do you hate the Democratic Party so much? Like, why didn't we win your vote? And don't forget Donald Trump for a second. He's, let's say we win, Donald Trump's gone at that point. Like he'll linger in our politics, but like, he's not I don't think he'll run for a fourth time, but oh my God, if he did, I might.
I don't know if he'll be alive in 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, he's already too old, but we need to go listen and have those conversations because there's the element of, I love Donald Trump and all these people support Donald Trump and they think he's the bee's knees and like whatever. But there's a secondary element to it, which is like they hate us and they can't stand the way that we talk and they can't stand the way that we advocate. And like, I think a lot of that gets lumped into, well, they're racist, well, they're sexist. And like a lot of people are, sure, a lot of people are, but I don't think all of them are. And I certainly don't think that that racism and sexism is explicit. It might be implicit. And that's a solvable problem. And again, I don't think if we're talking, I think the electorate is made up of like 35% white women and 30%, white dudes. We don't need to win all of those guys. We just need to win more of them than we're winning right now. Small fractions of a percent make a difference. In the same vein, like the Trump campaign is trying to win over more black men, and they're trying to win over Latino voters, and they've met some success and inroads in that. We need to be doing the same. And again, I want to state this as many times as I can. The Harris campaign, in my view, is doing a really good job of this. I really do. I think they're taking it seriously. I think they understand the assignment, and you see that in the way that they're campaigning right now.
So I just keep thinking about, there's this one friend of mine, and he's a Democrat, but he's 35, I think. He's single. He's got a decent job. He owns his own house. He owns his own car. He's not unattractive, but he's not conventionally attractive. He's a big dude, and he's a little overweight, but and he's a really nice guy. He's really smart. So I was just asking him one time, if he's got a girlfriend or anything, and he's like, no, it's hard to find one. And I was like, what about those dating apps and stuff? And he said, and I didn't check the statistics on this, and I might not be remembering it right, but he said only 2% of men get responded to on those apps, unless you're one of the best looking guys, unless you're Ryan Gosling. Nobody's gonna swipe in there. I don't know which. I've never used them, so I don't know if it's swipe left or swipe right. But I think that there is maybe there's something with the internet culture that it's made it harder for a lot of men to find companionship. And since they're not finding companionship with women, they're finding companionship with one another, and it allows them to build up resentment, and for people that want to sow seeds of resentment to find a place for it. So
yeah, I think that's right.
I can see JD Vance appealing to somebody like that.
I can't imagine JD Vance appealing to anyone, but I could be, I'm maybe more than a little biased on that. I don't. There's with Trump, I don't like Trump, but a lot of times I'm like, I see the appeal in that. I see it. I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. With JD Vance, I'm like, who is this guy for? I don't understand it. I do think there is a crisis of connection amongst young men, particularly with women, or at least significant others. I don't want to be heteronormative about it, but I think dating apps are extreme. I met my wife on a dating app, and it worked out. And as people can tell, I'm fairly overweight. I weigh 380 pounds. I used to weigh 600 pounds, but I think there's a lack of a dating app removes friction, I think, in a lot of people's minds, where they're like, oh, I'll download, I can't even remember, Tinder. I'll download Tinder and I'll swipe right. And then now it's a numbers game, right? So now I have to I know that this is the way my brain works, but I'd be like, if I have to swipe left or right 100 times to get, one decent message, okay, that gets me there. But, I think going out and meeting people would probably be better, right? But fewer and fewer people are meeting in colleges, and then you have these divides of how differently men and women are thinking. And something that we have to communicate better as, practitioners of building political coalitions is the way we talk about, abortion, the way we talk about gay marriage, the way we talk about, the issues is they're obviously very geared towards women, as they should be. They're issues that, at least abortion as an example is extremely geared towards women. But we do need to figure out probably how we message abortion to men in a more effective way. Because there are a lot of men, and again, this is not something I agree with, but there are a lot of men that are well, if I get a woman pregnant, I should have a say in that. And I'm not advocating that they should, but we should probably have a way that we talk to them about that helps get them past that, right? I feel the same way about issues like guns. Guns are very popular with white men. I have a little boy at home. I hate guns. I don't, I may or may not at some point own a handgun, but I don't think I'd ever buy certainly anything else. I don't understand that culture, but we need to figure out how we communicate to people who like guns and collect guns, who grew up in that culture, that, hey, our kids are being shot in schools and we need to do something about it. that isn't, we're going to take away your gun, because that's how the right will then use the extreme of that to go, they're taking away your right and your agency. They'll say, yeah, they're fighting for women to have abortions after the 9th month, which is ridiculous and doesn't happen anywhere. But they'll say that, and then they'll say, and here's how that's hurting you, right? And what we need to do is go, look, we're fighting for women to be able to have the right to make their decisions. And for me, like, I think about it a lot in the context of what I want a government to do and what I don't want a government to do. I don't want a government making healthcare decisions for people, but we need to figure out how we communicate that to men so that men resonate with that beyond, because it's nice when, like, Kelly, like, you had a really nice thing you said earlier where you talked about how you want to make sure that the women in your life have the same rights and freedoms as everyone else. I also want that. But again, most voters are very self-interested. And so I think we have to, like, get a little bit beyond what we want for our neighbor and get a little bit to, like, what we want for ourselves and what we want individually for a voter. And that's why advocating for that constituency, I think, makes a big difference. We can go fight for more votes than we're fighting right now if we can figure out the right way to message it. I don't have the answer right now. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I have the answer in terms of that, but that's a lot of what I'm thinking about right now. Hopefully that makes sense and isn't.
It does. Okay. Like, the way I always approach you, like the way I've always approached the gun argument is that I think that the polarizers on both sides lead the argument. So it's like, you got some people saying, and I think it's very few that say we need to take away all our guns. And then there's some that would say anybody can go anywhere and buy a gun anytime they want. There should be no regulations at all. And I think most of us would agree that as long as you're a law-abiding citizen and you don't beat your wife or anything, you're not like a violent person, you should be able to go out and buy a gun for self-defense or for sport or for hunting. But if you're a terrorist, that you shouldn't be able to go to Walmart and buy an AR-15 with 750 rounds of ammunition and 525 or 50 round mags, and then just be able to load it up and shoot up everybody in the store right there. Like, there needs to be somewhere in between is the conversation. It's not, and most of the debate is driven by extremists on both sides. And most of us agree that the truth is in the middle somewhere. And what we should be doing is discussing how much gun control we should have, not whether we should have gun control. And I think that there's a real place to listen to different people and different perspectives on that.
Well, and in the same vein, like, I think about this, like, guns are sort of a perfect example of this, because I was actually talking to someone from Brady not too long ago at the DNC about what a compromise gun safety legislation bill would look like between Republicans and Democrats in the Senate. And I was talking about, like, and I say this as a parent, like, I don't love the idea of, like, a school resource making sure that every school has a school resource police officer there, or like having, metal detectors in schools, but, like, Republicans advocate for those things heavily. Right. And, like, if my trade-off was, okay, we're gonna put up the money to have there be a metal detector in every school that kids have to go through in order to get into school, plus a resource officer they have to deal with. And by the way, I recognize the very serious issues for particularly younger people of color with school resource officers, and make sure that they're properly trained, would be, like, one way to handle that. But, and then in the reverse of that is we tighten up background checks, we tighten up waiting periods, we tighten up, who can get a gun and what type of gun they can get. Would that be, like, a decent compromise? And I think the answer is probably yes. In the same way, like, the border bill, like, there's things in the border bill I absolutely hate, but it's a good bill. It's a good bill overall. And we're going to have
compromise. Nothing in life is a compromise.
Everything in life,
everything you want. Like,
right.
You're not getting something you don't want. It's not a compromise.
Right.
And it's like the Republicans just want us to be compromised. Like, they want everything 100% their own. And they don't want, like, the border bill was a compromise. But because we got something they didn't want, that they had to sabotage it.
Well, it's also, I think, a lot about the things that because the other thing is how we communicate to people and what we talk about and how we talk about to them. Because keep in mind, like, you and I both have, relatively large Twitter followings. We're very active on Twitter. Like, the average person doesn't have a Twitter account. They don't. Mm-hmm. And if they do, they're certainly not checking it as many times. I've probably checked it 5 times while we've been on this YouTube together. Mostly joking, but it there are certain, you're right that the extremes on both sides pull everybody away, and you're right that it becomes, like obviously the right sort of acts like they just want to press it all down and make it impossible to get anything done. But there's also like certain stances that I think both sides take politically that don't make any sense to like regular people. Like, and the border wall is a perfect example of this. I understand the argument against the border wall. I'm not currently advocating for a border wall. The border bill has one. But to a regular person, I feel like just like a person who's not tracking politics, who's like going about their day to day, that, is, I always frame it like this. Like, imagine you're like a single parent working a couple jobs, trying to raise a couple kids, and you're at most tracking 2 or 3 news stories a week, just because you don't have time, not because you can't. And it's a border, putting up a border wall makes sense to a lot of people, and then you have other people that are arguing against it and being like, that's racist, and like, and it's not. It's just it's hard to get the nuance of the topic in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like school resource officers in every school, or metal detectors in every school is also very unpopular with the left, and for good reason. I'm not saying there aren't valid reasons for that, but it's also like, but to a regular person that just has kids and like sends them off to school every day and wants to make sure that they're safe, arguing against them just sounds ridiculous. Like, it just does, because it seems like a very simple solution to a problem. And so like how we navigate the complexities of that and nuance in a digital age, when people are being inundated, when people are being asked to do more than ever before and have shorter attention spans than ever before, I don't have the solution. I'm mostly just talking about problems right now. Yeah. But that's just something I think a lot about, because like I'm trying to think of like, what does it look like? Like, we win or lose this election, we're all going to do the work that we were going to do in the next 2 weeks, but like then we got to win the next election, and we got to start to erode what Trump has done. I think more than anyone, what Trump has done to our politics, and some of that's going to be like how we communicate with people and how we talk about complex issues and how we build a platform that makes sense to people, because I think there are large parts of the platforms of both political parties don't make sense to people. They just don't.
So I agree, and I think that we miss a lot of people further to the left entirely with the conversation, as well as missing people further to the right. There are a lot of white dudes I know that are, that are younger, that are really upset about Gaza, for instance, and some good friends of mine that really are having trouble voting for Harris, even though they despise Trump, just because of the funding of Netanyahu's, what they call genocide, and whether or not it's genocide or whatever is kind of moot right now. Like, they see it as that, and so they have trouble with it. So it's like you got to reach in 2 directions at the same time, and I think that makes it more difficult than just being an extremist like the MAGAs are. The MAGAs aren't really trying to get anybody new.
Well, and keep in mind, the MAGA movement is much smaller than you think it is. Like, I think people tend to say, well, if you vote for Trump, you're part of the MAGA movement, but really you're not. Like, maybe at most a fifth of the country is part of the MAGA movement. And even then, I think I just don't believe it's that many people. They're the loudest people, no question about it. But it's less people than you think it is. Because there's a lot of people that are just trying to make what they believe to be the best decision for themselves and for their family. Like, that's what most people are doing. And, my mom and dad are both big Republicans. I don't think either of them like personally like Donald Trump, and I think they find him can be completely ridiculous, but they believe that they were better off during the 4 years of Trump's presidency than they were under Joe Biden.
Yeah. And that has,
right. You can argue whether or not that's the case or not, but like that's what they're doing. And they hate Democrats for lots of reasons. They hate that I work for the Democrat. They work in the Democratic Party. They absolutely hate it. And I could care less, because I've been defying them since I was 4 years old. So, and I'm not gonna stop now. But it's like I have a buddy that I was hanging out with this weekend, and like by every count, like he's he and I agree on like 80% of issues, and like, but he's voting for Trump because he wants pro-gun judges. Like, that's his whole thing. And so the prioritization of the way that people layer stuff, like my mom is going to vote for Donald Trump because she thinks her 401k will be higher under Donald Trump, which is ridiculous. And I could read her the stats all you want, and she won't accept it because she hates Democrats. And so we do have to figure out like how we fix that branding problem. And I don't know what to do with it right now. It's just something I'm thinking a lot about, trying to come up with.
I think Democrats tend to have fact-based conversations, and Republicans, and I'm not saying this pejoratively, but Republicans tend to have belief-based conversations. They vote based on what they believe, and they filter what they know based on those beliefs. So if you say we have the stock market at a all-time high, they find a way to rationalize that to where it fits their belief system. They don't go, okay, it's at an all-time high. Maybe Biden is not killing the stock market. Like they don't. And I think that might be why there's so many more of them that are like Christian, right? That their belief leads them, whereas Democrats tend to be their knowledge leads them. And I'm not saying that Democrats are more inclined to be knowledgeable or more inclined to be fact-based. I'm saying fact-based people are more likely to be Democrats. And
well, I think it highlights to me that there's, and I say this with reverence, to be clear, if it sounds pejorative, like there's a simplicity to the way that Donald Trump campaigns that I think should be studied forever. Should just be studied forever in how smart it is. And you're right that it's belief based, right? And I think Democrats should do a better job of that. And I also think Democrats should do a better job of dialing down the rational side of things, which sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, but I think is true. But like we're in an age where stories and individuals are going to matter so much more in how we win elections, and that's going to demand a different type of candidate and a different type of political party and a different type of communicator. And I think Kamala's a very good communicator on this front, to be clear. I think she's doing an awesome job. But whereas Joe Biden, I love Joe Biden. I think he's an amazing president, but he's clearly of a generation behind. Yeah. Where it was enough for him to go on Meet the Press to get his message out there, where it's not enough to do that now. And even for Kamala, I would want her to be more aggressive in terms of like the internet-based communication that she's doing, the frequency of everything. I'd like to see more of it. She's doing a lot of it. But I want to see that like Pete Buttigieg feels like that model of a candidate. Gretchen Whitmer feels like that model of a candidate, like people who kind of get it and they're of a different era of politicians. Josh Shapiro, I think, gets that a little bit, but there was I worked on Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign, and what I loved about that campaign was the messaging was super simple. Like it was super. Bernie's a really smart guy, but the messaging was really simple. We're going to give everyone Medicare. We're going to get rid of student debt for everybody. We're going to do simple, 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 simple. And a lot of Kamala Harris' policies in this election have been really simple, and I think in a smart way. Like Trump is good about being like in 2016, you knew what Trump was going to do. He was going to build a wall, and Mexico was going to pay for it. And as ridiculous as that is, it's simple. And in an age where we're getting, our feeds have never been more overloaded, we need simplicity of that message, and we need it to be kind of a little bit more guttural and instinctual. And we need people to believe our messengers. And that's why, look, Kamala Harris, there's a poll out today. She's got a 51% favorability rating, which makes her probably the most popular politician in the United States right now, active politician. That's crazy. That's a crazy number. If you told me that 3 months ago when this all started, I would have been like, no, there's no chance.
Now you're actually, I know you've got a hard out at 12:30, right? Or
I've got to go in a couple minutes.
So I just want one more question then, if we could. We've got 8 minutes left. And I've noticed from, following you on Twitter, you're pretty knowledgeable about polling and how polling works and everything. I imagine that goes together with your job, or with your business. There's been a lot of things about Republicans trying to, what's the word? They're like overweight the polling or something like that.
Yeah.
What does that mean, and how are they doing that? And do you think that's really happening?
Well, it's definitely happening. Whether or not it's impacting the models, I don't know, right? So I think I saw like about a third to 2/5 of all the polls that have come out that are in like RCP's average, for example. Like RCP, by the way, is like the worst model. It's very clearly like a right-wing outlet. Are coming from like Republican pollsters that are just flooding the zone with these polls. And they did it in 2022. And what they did in 2022 was they created an impression that there was a red wave coming, which shaped the media discourse. And sometimes you can shape the media discourse in a way that pushes, like, as people at the end, like if you're undecided, and there are people who are undecided and or they're low propensity voters that they don't know whether or not they're going to vote or not. And I think that's mostly what people are making a decision about, is whether or not to vote at all. Right now, when you get those undecided voters, you can create a self-fulfilling prophecy that they're going to I'm going to go vote for the Republicans because they won. And then I want to say that they won and they have all the momentum and blah, blah. And I do think like some people think that way, in the same way that like, when Alabama football is really good, like there are more people on the street wearing an Alabama football hat. So I think they're trying to do that. I think they're trying to shift the media discourse. But I will tell you, this race is really, really close. Like it just is. And it was always going to be close. It was close 3 months ago. It's close today. It'll be close 2 weeks from now. I would rather be us than them, because I think Kamala Harris has a higher ceiling. But a lot of people try to interpret and be like, well, Republicans think they're losing because they're flooding the zone with all these polls. And like, I don't think that's it either. I think they're flooding the zone to try to shape the media coverage, to try to give Democrats more anxiety, which I think they're succeeding at doing. But I'm okay with that, because a little bit of anxiety at the end of an election will lead to more donations, more door knocks, more phone calls, more people turning out. Like people are going to vote because people
don't doom scroll, vote, right?
Don't doom scroll, vote. Like if you've got time to doom scroll, you've got time to make some calls. Like that's just my reaction to the whole thing. And like, look, I have moments too where I'm like, oh my God, I think we might lose this. And I really do. I really do think Donald Trump could win. I really do think we might fall short. That's not me, pontificating about anything. It's just me telling you that the polls are close. But I'd rather be Kamala Harris. Her ceiling is dramatically higher than Donald Trump's. Like she's getting 50%, 52% in a lot of polls right now. He's stuck at 46, 47, 48. And
the Electoral College is, no matter you like it or not, is stacked in his favor. Like,
of course.
Like she has to get more votes to win than he does.
Yeah. Until we can credibly get either Florida back in the competitive column or get Texas to turn blue, we're going to be at a disadvantage in the Electoral College. And hopefully if we do one of those two things, it doesn't come at the expense of like California or New York. And some of it's like the popular vote margin. Two other things to add on this too. The popular vote margin probably doesn't need to be as large as it does this cycle, because there is an erosion of Democratic support in New York and California, which are huge states. So that's something worth flagging. So like when people are like, Kamala Harris needs to win the popular vote by 4 or 5% in order to win, that's not true. It's probably like 2.5 would be my guess, which I think she's more than on track to do that. The other thing here too is like you hear a lot of Republicans and media types pontificating about polling errors, and they'll be like, well, they underestimated Democrats or the Democrats or Republicans were underestimated in 2016. Republicans were underestimated in 2020. Sure, I agree with that. But like in 2016, Hillary Clinton, if you love her, if you hate her, whatever, she's a very unpopular candidate. Her favorability ratings were really, really low, and undecideds turned against her in mass. Plus, you have the Comey letter, which did not help things down the stretch at all. In 2020, Democrats didn't have the type of get out the vote operation that they normally do. And I think that was why the margin was tighter in a lot of states than it should have been because of COVID. You don't have those problems now. Democrats have a much better ground game. Republicans outsourced their ground game to Elon Musk, and it, by all accounts, seems to have been a disaster. Doesn't mean they can't correct it in the next 2 weeks, because more Republicans are going to vote on election day than an early vote. But I would rather be us than them. I just would. And Kamala Harris has a high favorability rating, and like there is a correlation between where undecideds and low propensity voters go and higher favorability ratings. Like down the stretch, when they've got to pull that lever, they're going to vote for the candidate they like more. And right now they're telling pollsters that they like Kamala Harris more than Donald Trump by a significant margin. Again, right. It's not a guarantee. It's just, that's what I see.
I agree with that. She's definitely got a, like, I think people, whether they're voting for her or not, some people can still like her even if they're not voting for her.
Yes.
I think the only people that are, well, I don't know. I don't see how you can like Donald Trump at all, but that's another story.
I have had moments where I found him to be oddly likable.
Like I can see why people like him in some ways. He has a kind of charm to him, but it's kind of a, like, he reminds me of Bugs Meany.
I don't know who that is.
You never read the Encyclopedia Brown books? Okay, so anyway, he was like the bully, and he had his little companions called the Tigers, I think, where this was his little gang, and he was the one that would commit all the crimes, and Encyclopedia Brown would solve them, and he would say things like, make like a tree and get out of here, or mix up his idioms and
Biff
stuff.
Tannen from Back to the Future.
Yeah. But he was there first. So,
Well, I'm gonna leave you. I'll because I have to go in like 1 minute because I have to get to on a work call. But I'm gonna leave you with like one, which is like I'm gonna tell you about something Donald Trump did that made me like him. That's why I'm gonna lead this on. We're gonna bridge the political divide here. Donald Trump, when he was campaigning in the Iowa caucus in 2016, I think it was the summer of 2015, actually, brought his helicopter to the Iowa State Fair and was letting little kids get on the helicopter to fly around. And then he would come down, he would take a photo op with the kid. Beautiful, beautiful stunt. Okay, beautiful, good politics. And one little kid, after going on the helicopter ride, is like in awe of this and turns to Donald Trump and says, "Oh my God, who are you?" And he turned without a moment's hesitation. You can look this up without a moment's hesitation and went, "I'm Batman." And I was like, I remember sending that to like everyone I knew and went, "Don't make me like you. Don't make me like you." Because that's like the only thing he's ever done.
Gotta give credit where it's due. That was a good line.
Pretty good.
So, did you want to real quick just share your YouTube channel and your Twitter?
If you'd like to hear more from me, find me on Twitter is where I'm probably the most active. Is at Mike Nellis, no underscore, just one whole thing. And then I'm on YouTube and I'm on TikTok, Mike _ Nellis, Nellis. Kelly, I should probably point out you have my name spelled wrong at the top. It says Ellis. There's an N there. It's like every teacher when I was a little kid made the same mistake, but no big deal. But it's just MIKE _ NELLIS. My YouTube account is new. I just set it up, so it's not professionally done yet. I will get that caught up, but my TikTok is all set up.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Shit happens. I don't care. But Kelly, thank you for this. And thanks for all your advocacy. I love your Twitter account, and I appreciate everything you do.
Thanks a lot. And thanks for coming on. Talk to you later.